Welcome everyone to our panel discussion to mark National Grief Awareness Week. My name's Sharon Young and I'll be chairing the session. In a moment, I'll invite the panel members to introduce themselves. But today is really about recognising this year's being defined by the coronavirus pandemic and its restrictions. And that's meant that dying, bereavement and grieving may have been very different and very difficult for a number of our residents. We hope that by answering some of your questions we've received, this panel will provide some helpful advice and information. So I'm Sharon Young, a local Kingston councillor. I have a medical background and my PhD research looked at how different groups of people understand and think about death and dying. I've written and spoken on this topic and facilitated death cafes since 2013. I'd like to ask the panel to introduce themselves, starting with Howard, Hanna and Vicki. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Howard Greenoff and I'm the Corporate Lead for Registration, Bereavement, Coronial, Pathology and Public Health Funeral Service for the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames. I've been working within the bereavement industry for over 30 years now. I started off as a second-class grave digger, would you believe? So I literally worked my way up through the ranks. So I'll be happy to take any questions around arranging a funeral, including a home funeral, allay any fears or concerns about behind the scenes at a crematorium, and also with regards to the impact of COVID-19 on funeral-related issues. I'd also take this opportunity to offer my sincere condolences to anyone who suffered a bereavement through the pandemic or under other circumstances throughout these unprecedented times. Thank you.
Hanna.
Hello, I'm Hanna and I'm the Assistant Registration Manager for Kingston. I've worked in registration for 12 years. Our office provides statutory services for residents for births, deaths and marriages, and we also work closely with the bereavement services as well. So this year we've seen a number of changes in the way that we work, and personally for this, a change in legislation which allowed us to register deaths by telephone for the duration of the pandemic. And we've also found that this has been really beneficial to a lot of people for a number of different reasons. So overall, along with my colleague Howard, we can advise on the first steps that the next of kin would need to take when someone's passed away, providing them further information and pointing them in the right direction for other services that they may wish to use.
Thank you, Vicki.
Yes, I'm Vicki Bourne and I'm the Counselling and Wellbeing Manager for Mind in Kingston. We run various generic counselling services. We're not particularly specialists in the area of bereavement, although of course bereavement and loss comes into so much of what we do and so much of what people seek counselling for. So we also have a telephone service which is running for people who want to talk, particularly for those who feel isolated at this very difficult time. So yes, a range of services that people can access for bereavement and loss.
Thank you very much. So turning to our questions, we had one that asked, my father passed away during the year and we still feel bad about not being able to mourn him properly. There were only 10 people allowed at the funeral. How can we move past this? So I don't know if anyone wants to go first, perhaps Howard?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that was the big impact of this pandemic because it happened so very quickly, and basically it felt to a lot of people, and those of us providing the service as well, that we were restricting a service at a very, very important and sensitive time in someone's life. The government, of course, came in with all sorts of new regulations and amendments to some of the things we had to introduce right across London and nationally, although there was differences between England, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, involved just limiting the amount of people who could attend to a service for a funeral, for a burial or a cremation for immediate family members only. And that was very much just to to try to reduce the risk of transmission of this disease, because that's the issue with it, isn't it? With COVID, it's the rapid rate of transmission that is the problem. So, you know, we went through the first wave, we looked back, we learned lessons, and very much the entire industry, that's funeral directors, cemetery, crematoria, are trying to provide as much business as usual arrangements for families and individuals through this time, obviously in line with Public Health England guidance and whatever statutory constraints are placed upon us. So at the moment, 30 people can attend a funeral service, subject to the limitations of the actual venue that's being used. So we have to be mindful of social distancing, and if there's household bubbles, that has an impact as well. So with regards to the people in the first wave, where it was just 10 people, and at one point I think we were talking about 6, then my suggestion would be, because there's been a channel shift anyway over the last few years towards celebrating life of the deceased after, dare I say, the final disposal, whether it be burial or cremation. So we're actually encouraging people to make a memorial service with family and friends. You can do it in your own back garden, or you can do it out in a park or wherever, and actually really come together and celebrate life or lives. So I think that's the way to do it. We've just recently introduced streaming capabilities at Kingston Crematorium as well. So there's an option now for people who can't attend to view, and also to take a sort of commemorative edition away on another format should they so wish. So it's something that could be replayed later as part of a celebration of life, should people wish to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Hanna, did you want to add anything?
It's just that, I mean, obviously when people come to us, they ask questions about the funeral and things like that, and we advise them to speak to the funeral directors and to the bereavement office as well. It's not particularly my area of expertise with the funeral planning and things, but there are, if people feel the need to talk to somebody, there are plenty of services available, and we can point them in the right direction when they do talk to us as well during the registration. So it's a very, very difficult time for people generally, and even more so obviously at the moment. So, but there are the right people that you can talk to, and I think Howard's idea of celebrating life once we're able to gather in larger numbers, I think is an absolutely fantastic idea. So yeah.
And I've heard a number of people say that they plan to hold a memorial service at a later date, perhaps, you know, at a significant anniversary or a special date for the person who's died. But I have also heard that, you know, for some people, holding a funeral or a farewell service is a really important part of their ritual, and sometimes the number of people who come to show their respects at that funeral is sometimes an indication of how well that person was respected or esteemed in their community, and that can be a real source of comfort for some people. So it has been difficult. I don't know, Vicki, perhaps you've had some people contact you about that.
Not particularly about funerals, no, but I just, you know, I concur with what everybody said, and I think, yes, it is very important for some people to have a ceremony with as many people as possible there, but people can also remember a life in different ways, perhaps go for a walk with some other people, somewhere that the person themselves particularly liked being in, you know, just there are so many different ways, and one thing that has come out of our recent pandemic is that we can be quite creative about, you know, celebrating lives in different ways and coming together in different ways as well, which, although might not be quite as conventional as they were, can offer very different things.
Thank you. So moving on to question 2, somebody's asked, what groups and counselling are available to me as a family member of a COVID-19 victim? I've heard of death cafes, but are there any virtual equivalents? So, I can start off, if you like, as somebody who's facilitated and been part of Death Cafe for a number of years. I recognise the importance of people having a safe space where they can come together and talk or share with other people. Grief has many different outlets, and people grieve very differently over different time. So at the moment, a lot is virtual rather than physical, according to the restrictions. There are still some virtual death cafes being held online. There are also a number of online services and groups. The NHS have a very good website, and the Good Grief Trust, who really facilitate National Grief Awareness Week, have a host of information and support services on their website. I know there are also telephone opportunities, but Vicki, you spoke earlier about telephone counselling.
Yes, our counselling is taking place via the telephone or on Zoom, and we have other one-off counselling sessions that we can offer. They're free as well, actually, 30-minute sessions with a qualified counsellor, again over the phone. So we have a range of different virtual services going on at the moment, and the waiting lists aren't too long, so please do get in touch. We always really appreciate hearing from people. Obviously, I can add to that, there's Kingston Bereavement Service and Cruise, both of which are obviously specialists in the area of bereavement.
And if somebody doesn't have access to the internet, those telephone numbers are fairly easy to find, aren't they?
Those telephone numbers are really easy to find. They're all advertised on our website or on our social media, but that's going back to the internet again. But please get in touch, email me or ring our number at the office, and someone will get back to you and let you know those numbers and tell you how to get in touch.
Thank you. Howard?
Yeah, I was going to just re-emphasise the Good Grief Trust. It is a fantastic umbrella charity for all things related bereavement, including COVID. But if someone is really struggling with technology or has got accessibility issues and has not got the opportunity to go perhaps to a library when they can to look things up there, then I would suggest they give their local registration service or crematorium or cemetery provider a call, because everyone who works within those particular professions wants to help people and have been and will be bereaved themselves and know exactly what people will be experiencing. And I think it's important to remember that bereavement and the expression of grief, you were quite right, Councillor, when you picked up on the different cultural aspects, and that is something that's had to be tailored through the various London faith cells to help people come to some realisation about what we can and can't do so we can get a happy medium. But I think the main thing for me, having lost my own mother and father, is to express yourself in whichever way that you feel is appropriate. If you have to go and stick your face in a pillow and have a scream, or go out for a dog walk and shout when no one's around, go and do it. Don't hold back the tears. Just be really true to your own feeling, because there's no special way to deal with it. You've got no control. It's happened, and you've still got to go on.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And that brings us on to our next question. What tips do you have that might help with coping with the loss of a loved one? And as you said, I think grieving is really different for each of us, and there's no right and wrong way. So every day is different. And it's about being kind to yourself and giving yourself space to grieve as and when you need to. And I think with coronavirus, when we think about a good death, we think somebody coming to the end of their life, maybe becoming poorly, having time to get their affairs in order and talk through things with their family and friends. And, sometimes COVID, the way the disease has progressed, has been very quick in a number of cases, and people haven't had that time to say goodbye and have those last real heart-to-heart, face-to-face discussions. And I think that does have an impact on people as well.
Yes, because a good death's a bit of a myth, isn't it? Very few people do have that. It's a nice thing to hope for and wish for, but in reality, you know, as I say, it's quite rare, really, isn't it? Sadly.
And it's different to it means different things to different people. Some of the things people have shared with me that they've done that they felt helpful was, you know, planting a tree or planting an area of the garden they could have somewhere as a special place, or something physical they could use to remember that person. I know when my friend died, he was quite young, and his friends made a Facebook wall, and love or hate social media. You know, it does have a real source of comfort for some people, that people can write in or post pictures or memories on that wall, and some people really like that as a lasting testament.
Yeah, especially because we can't have books that we might have had in the old days, and they're lovely things to have as well, but it's much more hard to share those physical things now, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think
sorry,
for a certain generation of people, the living memorial is really beneficial, because they can see something grow and care for it and nurture it, and they can invest in that, and they can even place cremated remains around it or under it, and you can get all sorts of things now, like wildflower seed hearts and such things, which you can plant so it comes up in a special shape. So I think it's whatever suits a particular individual and their interest, but I think there's also got to be an understanding in oneself when you're bereaved that it's not everybody else's fault. I sort of liken it to going to the cinema in an afternoon and being sort of closeted away and then coming out and life goes on, and it's sort of like a big culture shock. So I think the worst thing you could do is try and take yourself away from that personally. It doesn't mean you're forgetting anybody. There's no need for sort of like survivor guilt or anything like that. But I think you've got to understand and try and be nice to everybody around you, because if they don't know you've been bereaved, they're just going to carry on acting as they normally would. And if you don't let people know, then they're not going to have any idea that you could be particularly sensitive around a certain topic or issue, you know.
And of course, people still find it very hard to talk about, don't they? That old kind of adage about people crossing the road sometimes when they see you coming, and because they feel awkward. And grief is still such a taboo in our culture, isn't it?
I was going to jump in with something there as well, because I suppose it kind of links both previous questions that we've talked through. But my mum passed away very quickly in Spain, very close to Christmas, and they do things very speedily there. So we didn't have a funeral, and we didn't get to go, and we didn't get to go through that whole process that we've been talking about. So I think I was lucky. I worked in registration at the time, and I had my colleagues around me that are used to having those conversations anyway. But it is, I think, a lot of people are very scared to talk to you. And if you start opening up, if you feel that you can, to talk to them, even if it's just to offload or tell a funny story or something, you know, like that, then I think it's helpful. Yeah, and every year I get my mum's favourite wine. And sorry.
No, I think that's right. Some people have their rituals and their ways of remembering that person that would be fitting, and they know they would enjoy those rituals, but you know, perhaps they're not there to celebrate with them, but it's a nice way to mark their life and the things you enjoyed together. Yeah,
I mean, well, the other things as well is that there's so much that can be done now, particularly if someone's been cremated. With their cremated remains, you can have them painted into a painting, you can have them in jewellery, you can have them in a lovely little keepsake at home, and they don't even have to look sort of funerally. I mean, we provide photo frames with keepsake urns or full-size urns at the back, and you would never know what it is. So then you're always looking at that favourite picture of them. I've got one like of my mum with my dog, both who aren't with me anymore, and I look at that every morning, just give it a quick tap, and that's been about 4 years now, you know, so you never forget. I think you just got to be true to yourself and in touch with your feelings. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, and I think it can surprise us, you know. I mean, my father's died 15, 16 years ago, and yet there is still the odd occasion where it suddenly gets me, and I think, oh, it'd be so nice to talk to my dad about that. So time does heal, but it doesn't make you forget. Yeah.
No, it becomes almost anecdotal, and you start. My own personal experience is you start to remember all the funny things and the mum and dad isms, and then you suddenly realise you spent half your life swearing that you will never be like your mum and dad, and then suddenly realising for half your life you're actually turning into them.
Sure, we've all been there.
And there's comfort in that, I think. There really is, you know.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to our next question. If I'm planning a funeral, what steps are being taken to ensure a safe and respectful service in the current climate? Hanna, you might like to answer that.
I think that would probably be more Howard.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, well, obviously we have all the Public Health England guidance. We have instruction via the Mortality Management Group in London with regards to excess death scenarios, with shortening times for services to allow cleaning in between times. We speak to funeral directors, we speak remotely to families. We try and make the funeral as much as normal as it possibly can be, you know, and where there are exceptions that have to be made, that's explained and it's talked about. We even give guidance about how to travel safely to and from the crematorium or the cemetery. We ask people please not to touch door handles or anything like that, to stay in the cars, and that they will be escorted in. The deceased is usually taken in first, so the bearer party can withdraw, and then the families can come in safely. So we're doing everything that is reasonably practicable from a common sense and pragmatic point of view, is like I like to come from for everything basic, you know, cleaning in between, making sure our staff are safe, mental health, well-being of staff, super important as well, you know. So I don't think anyone going to a facility for a funeral or to arrange a funeral director has got any sort of grounds to be super concerned. But my ask would be that if they've tested positive themselves, or in a household bubble where someone's tested positive, to please try and do it through a third party and avoid all sort of contact if possible. I know it's difficult because it's the person you love, but there's a bigger sort of picture, isn't there, socially about it, and that's the key.
May I ask a question as chair? I looked on the Kingston Council bereavement website, and I noticed that there's a link to Tell Us Once. I don't know if one of you might want to explain about Tell Us Once, because I imagine that could be quite helpful.
Yeah,
I think that's Hannah's wheelhouse.
I can explain about Tell Us Once. So at the end of the registration process, we then go through the Tell Us Once with the people that we've got on the telephone, what we call the informant. So it's the person giving us the information about the person that's passed away. And the Tell Us Once service is really good. It provides information to all the relevant government bodies that that person's passed away. So it's council tax, passport, driving licence, electoral register, blue badge. It tells everybody at the same time. So it saves an awful lot of individual telephone calls and contact. At the moment, it doesn't do anything in the private sector. So banks, building societies, shares, investments, things like that, they all need to be notified separately. But anything that is government related are all notified centrally with this Tell Us Once. So it is a really good service and very useful for people.
And I guess that helps give people an overview over all the people who need to be notified, because you might not necessarily remember that one or part of an organisation needs to be told as well as another.
Exactly. There is the government website itself has a section for what to do when someone passes away, and it's very detailed, very informative, and also very clear to read as well as to what exactly needs to be done from the first stages of registration right through to probate. So it is, the government website itself is very informative and very useful.
Thank you. And Vicki, I'm just interested in, you know, the number of calls or people that contact you because they are grieving or struggling to cope with grief? How much of that is your work?
A fair percentage, I would say. You know, losses come in very different forms, don't they? And they might not have lost someone recently. It might be a loss from some years back that they feel has never really been resolved and they've never grieved them properly, often from a childhood. So many people sadly lose parents when they're very young. So yes, no, I have to say loss is a very major theme that we deal with in all its different forms.
Our final question asks, and I think we've covered this quite a lot in talking about the different ways of marking bereavement. Is there any way I can pay a public tribute to someone who has passed away? So I don't know if anyone wants to kick in with that. We've spoken about trees and seeds, you know, physical tributes, and using creative techniques like jewellery and photo frames. I really like that idea. Are there any other ideas?
And people still put, sorry, I'm interrupting, people still put tributes in the paper, don't they? And that obviously was the old traditional way, and you still see those happening. Obviously not so much as they used to, but that's an important way, I imagine, for some people.
Could I just say, with regards to the tributes, having also been a funeral director, regrettably, there's certain people in today's society who take advantage of people who are under a great deal of stress or disadvantage. So if you're going to do something in memoriam in the old-fashioned way, please, please, please do it after the funeral service has taken place. Because what certain people do is read obituaries, and then they know that they can then go and have a free reign at that certain time in that location. It's horrible to say, but that's a real practical sort of step. I think the other thing to do is we could focus on, I don't know if you want to say anything about it, Dr. Young, but the National Grief Week that's been sort of promoted by the Good Grief Trust, because they're looking for people to do things there on their website if they want to. Something else, again, a bit old-fashioned now, but fairly modern for those old enough to remember it coming in, is the tying of floral tributes to lampposts, telegraph poles, park benches, and all the rest of that kind of thing. So, you know, that's still a very, very valid method of commemorating someone's life. And I know there's a couple of places I see in Kingston, and they've been doing that for as long as I've been working in Kingston, which is 20 years. So, you know, and they're fresh, and it's looked after, and it's every year.
Yeah, that's a lovely idea.
Park benches, that's another lovely, I enjoy reading those actually as you go for a walk along the river, or sometimes in the park and places where people loved. Putting some kind of plaque on those is a really nice way to remember. I think Ian Jury's got one, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And in fact, Swan Pier has been refurbished with planks that people have bought a plank to commemorate either a loved one or a celebration of a wedding or birth. So yeah, there are lots of creative opportunities. I should say that next week, from the 2nd to the 8th of December, is National Grief Awareness Week, and Kingston Council will be lighting up the Guildhall yellow. And we're lighting the Guildhall yellow really in memory of those who've died this year, and as a mark of respect to all our residents who've lost friends or family members. So we wouldn't encourage people to come to the Guildhall, but please know that we're lighting that in memory and respect of your loss. As Howard mentioned, the Good Grief Trust, on their website, they have a host of different ideas, so you can take part in some of the activities that they've got, and we're asking people to share their stories. So talking is good, sharing is good. It's a lovely memory and a way to share your situation. So you can either, if you want to share it through the council, you can email the council, or you could share through your own social media or your own friends and family groups. Did anyone want to add anything before I close? No? Okay, so I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of our panel members. Your experience and your insight has been really helpful, and I hope people have taken something away from that. So thank you all. Thank you to James at Kingston for putting the event together and coping with the technology. And we decided that we'd like to leave you with a trailer for a short film that is filmed around Kingston called The Last Goodbye.
In the last few minutes, the death toll has been announced, and it's an increase from yesterday by 181. So the death toll for the UK is now.
When we first heard of COVID-19, we felt scared, because if COVID-19 was going to spread to the UK, then my family and I would be on the front line.
When we collected our first person who was suspected of having died of it, it hit me then that actually it wasn't something that we were going to be able to escape from.
My father fell ill and we had to admit him to the hospital. He had symptoms of pneumonia, but we couldn't bring him home alive.
There were 3 consecutive weeks in April in which more people died than there had been in any other week while those records exist. We weren't sure the extent to which a deceased person might pose a risk to ourselves.
Our morgue is quite spacious, and it was almost full for the past 3 months, to the point that we were struggling to where to store our loved ones. As funeral directors, no testing was offered to us. We couldn't just close our doors and say, sorry, we're out of service for the time being. It's not possible. AJ, there's more masks in the...
We can't work from home, and we can't operate without those inherent risks. And there were a few days where I thought, this is quite scary actually.
The latest daily death toll has risen by a record 980 people. That's higher than Spain and Italy's worst.
In the government every day they say 165 here, 1,000. But for us, it's my dad. It's not a number. It's a loving person whom we have lost. It's not a number.
The funeral itself is so important because essentially that is that person's last chance to say goodbye. We have restrictions now to how many can attend. So it's definitely robbed a lot of people of that, final special moment with their loved one.
According to our Hindu scriptures, we cannot do the rituals with the closed casket. So funeral home said they can't keep the casket open. And I couldn't even grieve properly because we couldn't do properly the way he would have wanted. That guilt feeling comes every morning and I don't know how to get rid of that.
This pressure of COVID-19, I found it very difficult to function. Couldn't deal with the emotions. And I felt that I'm putting everyone at risk. If I asked my team and my family to work, it increased my anxiety and my fears and my worries.
I see people who die every day in all different kinds of circumstances, and it has changed the way that I approach things in my own life.
Working as a funeral director has taught me many things. To appreciate every moment with my family and people that I love. If you don't say I love you to the people that you love and you work with, you might only get one chance to say that word, so I'm never afraid to express my emotions anymore.
I told him that if I've done anything wrong in my life, please pardon me. He said, you're the best daughter and you looked after me so well. Nobody else could have done that. And that's the satisfaction I have.
Someone once said to me that we are the last eyes that see someone and we're the last hands that touch them. And I've never forgotten that, because I just think, imagine being able to do that for someone. Helping people at a difficult time is a privilege. It's such an incredible thing to be able to do, and you have to keep that in your head in all the time in your work.
I don't know if the pandemic has changed the world. It might have changed a few things within us. It gave us time to reflect on the fact that we don't live alone in this world. That it's not just about you, it's about everyone around you. It's about being part of the community, protecting each other. And you can't be selfish at those times.